If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
This has been another episode sponsored by Online Horse College. If you haven't had a look at the wide variety of equine-specific accredited courses, then go to onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there. Our guest today is Sue Green. Sue was brought up on a farm in New Zealand where horses played an important role, and like many young girls, she went to Pony Club and had a dream of greatness. She took this and travelled the world on a quest for greatness and was working in and out of many stables and yards in a period of 10 years. Met a lot of very inspirational people, rode a lot of very different horses, and ended up working as a theatre nurse, a veterinary nurse at Randwick Equine Centre. How are you, Sue?
Oh, good. Thank you, Glenys. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. Good to talk to you, Sue. Now, have you got an inspirational quote for us?
Yes. I'm sure my children would say that they've heard this more than once, and that's just to finish on a good note. It's a simple quote, but it's worked really, really well with horses and students, as I feel it's always important to have a positive outcome at the end of a session. It makes for happy partnerships, and it keeps people grounded in the fact that tiny steps work towards achieving a goal.
And you always remember the last bit, don't you? You know, if you finish on a good note, that's the main thing you remember.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, now you were brought up on a farm in New Zealand, okay, and obviously had a lot of horses around you, but just tell us your very first memories of a horse. How old were you and what happened?
Oh, yes, well, it was a working for beef and dairy unit, and so Dad was always out on the horse mustering stock. Our property was very steep, and so we couldn't use motorbikes or tractors. So my very first memories were really asking him, which way was he going and could I come, really. So
did he let you come?
He did. Very early on, of course, we were encouraged to learn to ride, all of us. I have a brother and a sister. And, this started out with an old white horse we had, quiet horse, and we were plonked on with a sheepskin and a surcingle, and off we were sent. And then we progressed to a pilch and clogs, which is a flat saddle, and this was all in with the reason of helping us gain a good seat, according to my father. So that's how we started to learn to ride.
Okay. All right, now you grew up with horses, you're in Pony Club, and then decided to travel the world. How old were you when you decided to travel the world?
Well, I was sent to boarding school at 12, and there's nothing like going away and not having your passion to keep you really interested. So it was just nothing entered my mind. That was what I was wanting to do. So I left school and got a job in a yard with some people near Auckland, a guy called Lockie Richards, and he had with him two people, Kate Mahoney and Peter Taylor, and so I learned an awful lot with them. Also to go home, my mum was not well and help on the farm, and so I was sort of 18 at this stage, and I was offered the chance to ride a lovely big chestnut horse from a dear friend of mine, and I was then selected to ride at the Masterton 1980 horse trials, Pony Club Championships. Yep. That was my first introduction to really chasing eventing, and that's how I actually came about. It's a bit of a long story, because the coach of the team was David Murdoch, and he had a partner in America, Sam Campbell, a show jumper, and they offered me a job to work with them, and that was the first time I left New Zealand, and I think I just turned 20.
Okay, and great that you went straight into a job. You didn't have to sort of go over and start looking, although a lot of people will organise that before they go, and that was really good and on recommendation. How long were you there, and where did you go after that?
I stayed with, it was in Old Wetton, New Jersey, just out of New York, and I stayed there for a few months and was exposed to a lot of horse shows up in New York. It was a fantastic opportunity for a country girl to learn the sometimes not so good things and good things to do with showing. because my passion was eventing, I went to a couple of events with one of the ladies at the yard, and she introduced me to a guy called Bruce Davidson, who at the time was the world champion. And to cut a long story short, he offered me a position to work, and so I moved down to Unionville in Pennsylvania and worked with him and I was there for a year and a half.
Yeah, I was going to say Bruce Davidson, he's on the United States equestrian team. I'm sure a lot of listeners would have heard about Bruce and how well he's done. Yeah. What about you tell us from each person one lesson that you learned? What's one thing that you learned when you were working for Lockie Richards?
Oh, goodness, that was a long time ago. I, at the time, had a big Cleveland Bay horse, and at that time, my riding skills were not good, and, he was very good on the flat, and so he helped me an awful lot with trying to collect
But what's one thing he actually told you, right? Because learning how to collect, that's very broad. Something specific that you can say, yep, I learned that from him. I remember him saying that in a lesson or in something that he did.
Yes, it was all about rhythm. I think rhythm is one word I can say that he said. And I think that goes through from a lot of the people I've had lessons with as well. But yeah, that was one thing that I remember from his lessons.
What about one thing from Bruce Davidson?
Oh, I have to be quite honest. Bruce didn't teach us.
Oh, didn't he?
No, there's a reason for this. Is his way of teaching was we observed him riding.
Okay.
And so that was a whole different, he rode with us always. He did have the odd thing to say, but one thing that I took away from Bruce is that to be very observant, which has actually gone straight away through into my coaching now.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. And what about the show jumper that you went to, the first one you went to in the US? Is there a lesson from him, just something you remember?
Well, I think I was more a working pupil and there wasn't an awful lot of teaching involved, but the exposure I had to the shows and really I think what I took away and learnt from both those guys was the preparation involved in keeping a horse at a high level with competition.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I took away from those two guys.
Okay, yeah, I'll keep going. It's interesting because, telling us it's not just where you went because, you can pick up a travel magazine and flick through the pages, but it's the lessons that you're learning as you go and work in these yards and work with different people. I think that's something that you can tell the listeners about and something they get out of it, because I think it's really important. And everyone's got a different perspective. Someone else will go and work for Bruce Davidson or Lockie or someone and say, I got a different lesson. Or, that was really something else that drummed into me. So your perspective is very important.
Yes. I mean, the time I spent with Bruce, which was a year and a half, was terribly inspirational. It was what I wanted to do. In the yard itself, they had working students and they were called gnomes, which is a funny term, but that's just what we knew ourselves as. I was slightly different. I had the opportunity to be there in a different capacity because the other students had their own horses and Bruce allowed me to ride some of his younger horses and compete at lower levels. And then the exposure that I had to and 3-day eventing was different in that stage. It had roads and tracks and steeplechase. And look, as a young little thing wanting to, take on the world, it couldn't have been better to be exposed, just to be amongst it, just to be out there and amongst it. And, as I said, everyone that was around us was as passionate as we all were, as I was, wanting to learn. So,
no, good. All right. Now, did you only work in the US? Did you go anywhere else?
Yes, no. I then went on. I had a trip home. As I say, my mum wasn't well, but then went back to England and had, another little job south of London in an eventing yard. Did a few horse hunter trials and.
So tell me again. I'm going to interrupt again, but a lesson that you would have learned, something you picked up there.
Look, that was a life skill lesson. That was a very, not so much a horse related, all the travelling I did, there was horses, but there was life skills involved.
Sure.
Things didn't go overly well, and as I said, it was a learning thing for me. And, as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old on my own, you'll just learn different things.
Mm-hmm.
That then, because it hadn't gone so well, I was lucky enough and I changed my whole tactic and borrowed some money from home and bought an Irish thoroughbred.
Mm-hmm.
I was set on a quest to thought, if I can't beat them, I'll join them. So I actually got a horse, and a kind lady down near Salisbury in Wiltshire allowed me to live in a caravan, and my horse lived in a little tin shed outside, and we shared a Land Rover, and I was able to do some eventing at lower levels with him, and it was a whole new world. It was something I was doing for myself,
mm-hmm.
and I learned a lot that way too. I learned that it's a tough world. It's a tough world out there in the horse world,
mm-hmm.
and so that's what I did then. And then I went on to change my view again. I sold that horse and sold him as a hunter, and the gentleman that bought him loved him to death.
Mm-hmm.
But on my own over there, just was very, very difficult. So I then set about gaining my British Horse Society qualifications, mm-hmm. and went through and did my British Horse Society assistant instructors, and then worked in a great big yard near Andover, in a place called Chatters Hill Riding Stables or Equestrian Centre. And that was a British Horse Society registered establishment where girls came to do their qualifications. And I worked there as one of the instructors and helped and sort of mould new people to learn what they were passionate about.
So when you were there, just in the yard, was that like a different system? Did you learn things, even just horse management systems and management, like business management, anything else, like along those lines?
Well, it's been a long time that I have been out, away from England. So, But while I was there and amongst that, I went on and managed the yard. And when you're working towards these qualifications, there's certain things you need to do, and and that was touched on. Obviously, the teaching was one side of it, but there was other sides as well. So the management side and all sorts of other things come into it. And that was it opened a whole different door or avenue to my learning. I was able to, see things in a different way from a management point of view.
What's something that you did see in a different way?
Look, I had never had really anything to do with business, and being in a position, I was given a position of authority as far as managing it. And so it became apparent how important, the business side of it was really. And, it just, and managing people, like there was a lot of girls that came through, and, so really from my point of view as an instructor, being able to work out time management and sort of looking into managing groups and things like that, it was, it was a really important part of that.
Do you mean managing groups within a lesson or managing people as a group?
Well, managing people as a group.
Yep. Okay.
And also in lessons as well, because we were a lot of girls all living together, and the age limits was from, mid-20s right down to sort of probably 16. And we had obviously several really good people that were there as well, instructors. There was one lady called Sheena Kazubska. She was there, and she was a dressage lady who I was very fortunate to be able to ride one of her good horses, and just all the opportunities, there's been little snippets of being able to really enjoy and embrace, where you are and what you're able to do.
So was Sheena's horse a dressage horse or an eventing horse?
It was a dressage horse,
okay,
yes. It was a dressage horse. So.
Yep.
But the other thing with talk about managing groups, we put on shows, we did different things where we put on, and the horses were involved. It was like a production, and it was a fantastic experience to be involved in that.
So in a production, you mean like a stage production with horses, or shows like competitions?
Well, no, it wasn't really a competition. It was more we did a musical sort of thing with a production, and then all the parents of the girls came and watched. And we dressed up, and it was a whole different take on it, but it was very, very exciting at the time. And, I think we all as a group of people all gelled together, and, it worked really well.
Yeah, good. Okay, and from there, did you come home from there or?
I actually met a couple of girls who'd come to have lessons that were from America. They were from Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee. And I went back to America with them. They wanted help setting up their establishment. And I spent quite a bit of time in Knoxville, Tennessee, and had a whole different experience there with being exposed to Tennessee walking horses and all sorts of other different things, hillbillies, and been lots of different chapters I've had in my life, and taken away different things from them all.
Okay, so one thing then that you took away from Tennessee?
More being able to adapt to different, like having an open mind with the horse world, that there are different ways. That's
important, yep.
Yes, and being able to adapt and, take on board, and that's actually helped me a lot, be able to, and I sort of say this to a lot of people, is that, you can learn something from anyone, and really it's very important to be able to listen and try and take something away from any experience you have with horses, really.
Wait, can you hear anything? No? That's because we're waiting for someone with a good quality horse product to be advertised here. If that's you, then contact us, horsechats@horsechats.com, and we'll send you the details. Thanks. No, that's good. Okay, yeah. Now from there, sort of getting you to go through, or get you to put your thinking cap on too. Yeah.
I know. I was trying to think. I actually spent about that time in a point-to-point yard.
Is that in the US?
No, that was back in England. I went back to England because I had met somebody, and so I was over there, and that was obviously the drive to being there that long and making it all work around the horses for me.
Yep.
And so the time I had in a point-to-point yard was a whole different chapter. It was riding short, it was riding track work, and from someone who, where you're told to ride long and keep your legs long and for dressage, and to ride short, it was exhilarating to be able to be going out of control almost, and it was a whole different
a lot of adrenaline for sure.
Yes, a lot of adrenaline, and the same thing, learning different things. Sort of fitness, being able to understand the fitness involved in different avenues in the horse world, really.
Yep. Good.
During all this time, it's very, very intense what you do as a horse person, and I found that all these different little chapters I had where I threw everything into it, I'd need to have a bit of a break between. So really it helped with the journey of the whole 10 years. But one of the breaks I had from the horse industry, just to having a break, was I spent some time in Switzerland as a chalet girl in a ski resort, and that's where I met my husband, who was an Australian. Hence how I'm here and how we, been able to touch base and talk now.
Yep.
So that was pretty much one of the breaks I had away, and met him. And then we came back to Sydney, Australia, and that was sort of the end of my 10-year trip.
Well, I was going to say, because it's not really, because, you're still away from New Zealand, and then you're working at the Randwick Equine Centre, weren't you?
Oh, yes. Well, it's my big overseas trip, I guess. I came back to Australia, and it was very hard. Even my husband, who'd been away, to settle back down into something again. And we got married and set about having a family. But I still had the desire to always find a horse or something. I even one day was in the supermarket checkout talking to somebody who said she had a horse, and the next minute I was giving her a lesson. So there's always a way. It doesn't matter where you are. I was in the middle of Switzerland, up in the mountains, and found someone who had a horse so I could go for a ride. If you want to, you can always find a horse somewhere.
Sure.
While I was in Sydney with the kids little, actually before just before the children were born, I'd done a bit of teaching up in Terry Hills and Samurai Park, and then in the Grange and the showgrounds. And then I set about doing my veterinary nurse qualifications, and was lucky enough to get a job as a vet nurse at Randwick Equine Centre. And this was fantastic. I just loved it. It was a whole different perspective on horses. It was not you were on the ground, you weren't on top, and all the things that went with any ailment. And I was lucky enough to work with some great people there, Percy Sykes, Treve and Jonathan Lumsden, and I was able to work my way up through, as a vet nurse to becoming a theatre nurse and exposed to arthroscopies and scintigraphy and, laryngotomy, all the things, really great surgeries that go along with horses and keeping them fit in the racing world.
Good. Now, I've got to ask you then, because, you sort of had horses when you were young and you've talked all the way through about adapting from one thing to another and being open-minded. What sort of core skills or character traits would you say to someone who's interested in working in the horse industry?
Oh, goodness. I've thought long and hard about this question, actually, because my journey was very different from a lot of other people, I guess, and how other people are doing it. But I really believe that you need to be totally passionate about what you're doing, and you have to be really, really dedicated to hard work. And you've got to be of strong character, because it's not easy out there. It really isn't. And so in that case, you just have to be terribly positive, because working with animals and people, sometimes it's hard, it's challenging, but it's terribly rewarding also. They really do fill up your life, and I wouldn't change anything that I've done, that's for sure.
So I was going to say the best thing, but you've sort of talked about the horses being rewarding and filling up your life. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
Well, as I said, just enjoy the journey. If you are actually embracing a horse career, you might think you're going one way, and I did. I was off on a quest for greatness to ride at the Olympics, and it took me all over the place, and I had all sorts of adventures. But, just enjoy the journey it takes you on, because it doesn't always mean that you end up where you want to be. But, as I said, I wouldn't change a thing.
Good. What about people who've influenced you? You've already talked about so many. Lockie Richards, Bruce, you talked, Is there one particular person, or it's been quite a few? You've got bits from everything.
Look, I find it hard to answer because there's been so many. I think Bruce, yes, definitely it was right at a certain time in my life where that's all I wanted to do, and being a little country bumpkin in America was the best of the best. He did inspire me. But there's been too many to mention, really, and they've all had an influence on my life.
What about horses?
Oh, yes, the same thing. As I said, the chestnut that took me to the New Zealand Pony Club Championships, from him to the horses that we now have with my children. I guess it's the horse that you are actually involved and engaged with right at this moment. I think, that is influencing you to the next step in your horse career, really, whether it be teaching someone or training someone, or so this, not one in particular.
Yep. What do you think your proudest moment's been? Was it at the New Zealand Championships, or another time, or a mixture?
This might sound, I don't know how this will be taken. My proudest moment was the day that I was able to go riding with my two children.
No, that's great.
As silly as that sounds as a mother, being able to impart my knowledge and have my two young kids at the stage of being able to ride out with them, that was one of my, most proudest moments. I remember ringing my dad and saying, I can die happy now. I've been able to pass my love and passion on to my children.
That's great. Really good. Now, coming back to the other end of the scale, because, you've got that love and you've got that passion, and it's just taken you all over the world. What do you think your biggest challenge has been on your way to where you are now?
Look, there's lots of challenges in pursuing a horse career. I myself just embraced that and took it as that's what I wanted to do. Something that came out of the woodwork that I didn't know was going to happen was 5 years ago. I found out I had breast cancer. And really, in that case, with a family and kids, I did find that a challenge. No one would know, because I never let it define me, but you just learn a lot about yourself, and, it's all good. Everything's good, but you learn about yourself, and you learn that you just have to take one step in front of the other and one day at a time, and it makes you grow and learn about yourself, really.
Okay. How are you now, though?
Oh, good. Yes,
Good.
all good. So, trips to the specialist and everything's in a good spot. So,
Good.
staying positive about it all. That's good.
Okay. If someone else is in your situation that you were in, what would you say to them?
Don't think too far ahead. I think you can't let it, as I say, envelop you. You have to just take one little step and don't think too far ahead and get to the next stage and just otherwise it just swamps your life. And so I just think try not to let it get to you too much and just take tiny steps. That's what I would advise somebody in that situation.
Okay. All right. Thinking about you as a coach now, what's a common fault you see with your riders or your horses, trainers, handlers? Can you talk a bit about that? And also the common fault, but what you do to fix it.
Okay. One thing, without getting into too much detail, that I hold quite close, and find passionate is the communication and relationship between horse and rider. I think that sometimes we take it for granted. I think that a lot of the time when people are riding, they're just passengers, and that's okay. But we really need to, and there's lots of ways to do this, and you've probably talked to many people with different ways of being able to communicate with a horse. But my message is to talk to the rider or the person dealing with the horses that they need to be aware of making sure that their instructions are clear and that the horse understands. Because I think, and you have to be aware of what you're asking also, just so that you don't create problems.
Yep, okay. No, I think that's a good one. If you're an equestrian coach or a horse riding instructor, or even if you aspire to be one, have a look at the free video series for horse riding instructors on the Horse Chats website. Go there now, have a look, horsechats.com. What about a book, Sue? Have you got a book that you can recommend for our listeners?
Oh, lots of books out there. I love horse books. I've got a library and they're fantastic. But one that stands out is, and I'm sure lots of people have said this, is Centered Riding by Sally Swift. It's just a classic interpretation of riding. There's many books out there, but that's one that I would recommend.
And remember, you can find all the books recommended by our guests at horsechats.com/books. You can have a look at the guest page for the individual book they recommended, or just look at the recommended books by order of popularity at horsechats.com/books. And certainly been one of our popular books too, I guess. We've got all our books on the website, horsechats.com, and we have them in order of popularity, and it's one of the ones that certainly a few people have mentioned, So if you go to that...
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, if you go to horsechats.com/books, you'll be able to see which ones are the more popular and which ones have been recommended the most. All right. Now, Sue, what are you looking forward to at the moment? You've got something exciting on the horizon that you're doing at the moment?
Yes, well, we are. My husband and I, the family, children are grown up, not only grown up and gone now, but my husband and I moved to a property on the south coast a year and a half ago, and we're working towards setting up an equestrian establishment. At the moment, tiny steps, and he's working madly, fencing, and just to try and get something that we can do together going forward.
Yep.
So yes, it's exciting to be thinking about that.
Good. Before we go, Sue, can you talk about your philosophy with horses? Just summarise it, and so it's sort of your message to go out to our listeners.
Yes, well, going back to the tip that I gave for riders, I think never take for granted the fact that you have a privilege to work with such a great, intelligent animal, and that's where the communication comes into play, that you need to be very clear with your instructions and be mindful of what you're actually asking from the horse. And it goes back also to everything I've said about tiny steps and finishing with a positive note.
Yep. No, that's good, Sue. So if people would like to contact you, what's the best way?
Look through the EA Coaches register. All my details are there.
Okay, so that's got your phone number and your email.
Yes.
Yeah, and those details will be on horsechats.com/Sue Green, or else just go to horsechats.com and search for Sue and you'll find those details.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Glenna.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks very much, Sue. Really enjoyed your journeys. It sort of brings me back. I did a bit of travelling, but I don't think I was away 10 years. I was away a little bit less than that. So great talking to you, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for letting me share my story with you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Now, if you're still there, you probably know that I'm absolutely passionate about education within the horse industry. That's why I host this podcast. My other venture is Online Horse College. Have a look now at onlinehorsecollege.com and I'll see you over there.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.